സംസാരിച്ചിട്ട് സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ചെയ്യാം. അതിനെ പറ്റി മറ്റേതായിരിക്കും മാറ്റിയിട്ട് ഒരു പ്രശ്നം സംസാരിക്കും.
ഇല്ല, അത് ഒരേയില്ല. അതിങ്ങനെ
A very good afternoon, all the participants. On behalf of the P.N. Panicker Foundation and the National Digital Library of India, who is also one of the co-organizers of this Reading Month celebration, along with Niti Aayog and MHRD, we are very pleased to invite each one of you for this webinar. And today we have a very dynamic civil servant, Dr. Prem Singh, who is also the advisor, HRD aspect of Niti Aayog. And he is going to talk about impact of COVID-19 on school education and the possible way forward. And he is with us, and I request Mr. Balagopalji to take over the proceedings.
Thank you, Dr. Vignesh. I'm immensely thankful. I'm grateful, and not only grateful, to invite a personality like Dr. Prem Singh, IAS office retired, to this very important webinar discussing on the role of Niti Aayog, because Niti Aayog is the think tank of the government of India. The Niti Aayog controls all the policy matters and analyzes the policy matters and advises the government to take appropriate decision to make India one of the strongest country of the world. Dr. Prem Singh is a MBBS MD doctor, and later he joined in the IAS, Indian Administrative Service, and he was posted in many places. And his most important posting was to shape the young IAS officers. IAS officers passed, those who are passed out of the examination and interview and everything, and those who have been qualified to put IAS in their name. The Missouri in Himachal, in Himachal, Uttarakhand is the place where all these IAS officers are shaped to take their charge as an administrator of the district or the administrator of the area. And in fact, Dr. Prem Singh was the main trainer. He is the motivator, and he is the creator. I can say the creator also, motivator, creator, and the main trainer of the IAS officials. Those who have passed out the examination after the interview, and they have been ready for posting to different places, different postings of the country. And so he has got a lot of IAS officers as a disciple throughout the country. And he worked very hard, and wherever he went, as the head of the institution, or as the administrator of the institution, or as the officials of the top officials of the institution, he made a mark of it. That's why the government of India, after his retirement, he has been assigned the key post as the advisor, HRD vertical in Niti Aayog. He's a very simple and very smiling officer. I am amazed by the way he receives the guest, because I met him last 2 years back. Then when I walked into his room without any appointment, he was very pleased. And after he gave a patient hearing with me, and he was very pleased to support the activities of P.N. Panicker National Reading Mission. He said, that's the need of the day. Balagopalji, what do you want? I'll be with you. That type of approach, because he realizes the best part of the personality so that he can help them. That is his helping mind, without any reference, without any introduction. I knocked at his door, and he invited me to his chamber. That is greatness. The man who takes much attention to the ordinary people, and how they have been treated, how they have been molded to bring to his what you call his area of work. That's his nature. That's why the government of India attaches much importance to Dr. Prem Singh, and he, not only that, he behaves. The bureaucracy, the lower level bureaucracy may not be in tune with the advisor, chief advisor of the Niti Aayog, but he convinced them and he molds them and he made them to understand the position and make all the positive response of the people, all the need of the people into reality. I welcome Dr. Prem Singh to this August webinar on this COVID program. Thank you, sir. Dr. Prem Singh ji.
So
Yeah, thank you so much, Bala Gopal. And it's a privilege and it's an honor that you have invited me to this event, which is part of celebration of great Panikar's month-long celebration on importance of reading, library, and also about education in that way. To all the participants here, let me upfront tell you that I am not an academic or an educationist. I am an administrator. As an administrator, I have worked in the field of education out of my own choice, which is like when I was in the district, I used to be chairperson of District Board of Education. And I gave a lot of importance to education, obviously because I felt that as a district magistrate or administrator of a district, amongst many things that a collector is supposed to do, the education was one area which was one of the most critical ones. In spite of being a trained physician or a doctor, I felt that health is important, definitely, but education somehow it affects every individual. So it definitely needed more attention from a district collector. So I spent about 3 years as chairperson of District Board of Education, and I implemented various programs in the district. Then when I was promoted in the state government, I still remember my chief secretary asking me, which department you want to work. So I again requested him to put me in charge of education, and they put me in charge of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Those days, 2005-6, what is now called as Smagra Shiksha Abhiyan, it used to be called Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, and I was the state project director almost for about 3 years. Then I continued my journey in the education sphere. As Bala Gopal has mentioned to you, I went to IAS Academy, Mussoorie, Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration. There I worked as a teacher, a practitioner teacher, a person who has experience of field. And I had a very fruitful and very rewarding tenure of 6 years, where I have trained thousands of IAS officers. In fact, maybe if I land up in any district out of 680 districts in the country, I will be knowing every collector in that sense. There again, it was out of my own choice, out of my own willingness that I came into this field. Then as an administrator, of course, I took voluntary retirement. I wanted to work from outside the government after spending almost 20 years in the service. And one of the reasons was that I wanted to do things from outside the government. And immediately after leaving the government, I did not resign. I took voluntary retirement. And immediately after taking voluntary retirement, I was again associated with the LBSNA as a visiting professor. Then I joined Niti Aayog as advisor education. Here again, let me tell you, I had a choice of, I was asked that I can join any of the 6 verticals. I chose education. This is just to give a background that, I'm deeply interested in education in every way. As an administrator, as myself as a practitioner, teaching young IAS officer for last 10 years now. I started in 2010 went on till 16 in the academy. Then last 4 years I've been visiting there very frequently. So that is the background about my being into education and interacting with all of you. I feel that I understand that some of you will be young students, some of you may be teachers, some of you may be education administrators like BDOs or district education officers or CRC or BRC people. If some of you are also IAS aspirants, that's also good. We can share some of the experiences here. And the topic that I decided to talk was, what will be the impact of COVID-19 on education, school education, and what is government, as public sector, as people we can do to mitigate the negative impact of COVID-19 on education. Now, if we were to look at what could be the negative effects of COVID-19 on education, there are many things which are very visible, which are very overt. Students are not able to go to school for last 4 months. They'll miss out on learning in various classes. Very obvious, one can make out. Then some of the students might miss out an year. Some of the students who are at critical stage like 10, 12 or graduation, they will also have serious impact on their placement. Some of the students who were studying outside their homes, they will find it difficult now after the COVID is over to go back to various hostels and colleges and universities. Some of the students are studying abroad. They will also find it difficult. So these are very, very obvious things that we will see. And as individuals, especially from higher socio-economic status, people who have wherewithal, these will be the concerns. That these are the problems. And if you talk to your friends, especially the audience who has this internet connection and who can listen to me, this will be a set of problems for all of us. And this is what you will see in the newspapers. This is what we will see in the TV debates, and so on and so forth. But as an education administrator of this country, I am concerned about far more deeper problems. Let me tell you that these are definitely the problems which I have discussed just now. They need to be addressed. They need to be taken care of, and government needs to think about it. But there are series of problems which we as individuals may not be able to appreciate. Let me give an illustration. A student who is studying in Thiruvananthapuram or Bangalore or Delhi, who is from middle class like all of us, will not be able to go to school physically, but he or she can learn at home. Her parents will be educated, they can teach her. She can get the books from a bookshop. Some of the online learning facilities which are available to children from slightly better off families, she will be able to take benefit of that education. Her school, which is a well-to-do private school or a good government school, would have started online learning, and so on and so forth. However, let me tell you that such privileges are only for about 15 to 20% of this country's children. About 80 to 85% of children in this country will not have these privileges. And their problems will be totally different. Sometimes so different that we can't even appreciate. It will be difficult for us to understand it unless you put yourselves into really thinking through. I mean, unconsciously it will never come to us that today there could be a school in Bihar or Orissa or rural Andhra Pradesh, that not only that girl child will be out of school, that school is closed, but her parents' income would have fallen down. That means her parents are not able to earn money. I mean, they might be, migrant laborers. They might have been working in a small hotel or restaurant or some kind of construction work. Their parents' income would have gone down. Moment their income goes down, this girl child who was studying in 8th, 9th or 10th will not be able to afford online education or any other form of education. She might land up as a child labor. And let me tell you, going by the size of this country, there may be large number of children who will have such kind of problems. Now, if we extrapolate this same issue, that in this country, there are large number of poor people. And in economics, we call it at the margins. That means people who are able to just afford their children to send to school, whether boys, girls, they will start dropping out. So in the post-COVID scenario, in addition to all the problems that we middle class and slightly better off people from the society, we can imagine that these will be the problems. But this country might face a large number of problems which are very, very serious. And let me assure all the listeners here that Government of India, MHRD, Niti Aayog and state government, we have been thinking through for last 2-3 months about each of these problems and how we can solve these problems. So many of the problems of post-COVID in education will not only be about, gap in learning. Learning gap is a very serious problem which all of us will get impacted. That, last year in 3 months, we were able to learn so much, but this year in 3 months, we are not able to learn. So that is learning gap. But a large number of problems of, COVID on education will spill out of education sphere. We might have more child labor. We might have child marriages, especially girls. We also might have malnutrition. Now, in our country, about 10 crore children are dependent on midday meal for their basic nutrition. Now, if midday meal stops, many of these children might suffer from malnourishment. And this could have serious implications on a scheme which is nothing to do with education department. This was Poshan Abhiyan, nutritional mission of Government of India. So the kind of impact that this COVID might bring in education department, in education, will not only be, restricted to the education per se. It might lead to various other problems. And on this, we keep reading a lot of reports. In fact, if you see Indian Express of yesterday, there was a very telling and very moving photograph of about 15-20 children, or most of them were girls from Bihar, from a community called Mushair. These are the community who are the lowest caste and very poor. And these 15-20 children, most of them girls, there was a photograph of them saying that these kids are out of school, they are malnourished, they don't get midday meal, and so on and so forth. As I said, that the photograph was so powerful. The today's Indian Express, there was a news that the additional chief secretary of the state who looks after the education department immediately took this very seriously and said that we will make sure that the midday meal reaches to all these children, not just these 15 children who are photographed, but tens of thousands of children in rural Bihar. So these are the kind of much more serious problems which are behind the visible range which we can think about. And again, let me tell you, even with all our efforts, even with all our energies and resources, we at Government of India and also at the state government level, we keep thinking that what all could be possible implications of this COVID scenario on education and children. We might be missing a large number of things, and I can tell from my own experience that even the brightest of the people with all the compassion in their bellies, and compassion in their hearts will not be able to think through every possible, you know, negative impact of COVID on children. We will come to know about this only when we visit these areas, or maybe some of the civil society members, some of the people, NGOs, some of the youngsters who are working in the field at the grassroots level, they will be telling us. So we are very open, you know, whenever we make policies in Government of India for, you know, such kind of situations, we are very open to any view, any suggestion, you know, any idea that comes from the field. So I'm very sure that many of you may be working in the field, many of you may be associated with civil society, NGOs, or from education department. We will be very happy to take your views. You know, sitting here in Delhi or state capital also, or even the district headquarters, we can only list out various issues that, you know, children may be facing in this villages, and we can come up with some policy solutions based on our own thought processes, based on our own deliberations, but that may not be sufficient. It is eminently possible that we might be missing a large number of children, a large number of issues that children are getting affected. So this again is a appeal to all of you. It's an appeal to all of you that if you have any, you know, anecdotal evidence and illustration and experience where you feel that, you know, children are getting adversely affected, please write to us, inform us, so that we can take remedial measures for these children. And also from our side, as I said, that we have been doing, you know, both at NITI Aayog and also at MHRD. Let me tell you, we have been meeting very frequently, even at the highest level, at bureaucratic level. We have been exchanging ideas. We have been talking to state governments. NITI Aayog runs a program called SAATH, Sustainable Action through Human Capital Development in Education in 3 states, which is Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, and Jharkhand. And we are in touch with all the state governments, district collectors, and we get a lot of ideas. Similarly, we are also involved in the aspirational districts. There are about 115 aspirational districts, and 25 are being looked after by NITI. However, me as an advisor education, I look after the education in all the 125 districts. So there again, we keep interacting with district collectors and, you know, civil society members, private people, on what all can be done in education sector and how can we mitigate all these, you know, problems. Now, if we see a range of problems that these children might face in the field, okay, in the villages, there are many actions which are required from the government side, the Government of India, the state government, district administration. Let me tell you, even if government puts it all might into solving these problems, the government cannot, because the sheer magnitude of problem is such that we need involvement of community. A very simple example I can give is, you know, in many of the cases, we realize that a simple issue like child abuse during this lockdown and, you know, post-COVID, now government will not be able to track every child abuse. The community will have to come forward. Of course, government will bring in, you know, IEC activities. They will inform you, they will inform the children, whether boys or girls, that these are the possibilities. But a community which is very well active, very well aware, will be able to reduce these incidences drastically. The government might be able to put a lot of police, lot of counselors, and government can bring in, legislation that if somebody does a child abuse, he or she will be given this punishment. That may not be sufficient. We need the community to get activated. So whenever we have such serious, deep problems in society, the kind of problem that we are facing now, we definitely need government to proactively take part of many areas. We also need private sector, which is doing its job. The private schools, philanthropists, a large number of other private sector people are doing their job. We also need civil society with all their compassion and with all their, rootedness in the rural India. They are also helping us a lot. We also need community. And what is community? All of us. We need to be very, very active, very proactive, and we should see in our own neighborhood that some of these ills, which may be temporary for next some time, and these evils will proliferate in such chaotic situation when children are not able to go to school, they are stuck up at homes. A girl child who is studying in 10th or 12th has to drop out and do a manual work, or maybe help her parents in earning daily wage. They may be exploited, there may be abuse of these children, and these are the areas where all of us need to be very vigilant. And unless we as a community we realize that each one of us is also responsible for our children, we may not be able to, the government alone may not be able to take care of everything. So it's like, whenever we see this problem here in the government also, we need to see it like a state, okay, not as a government. Government is only one part of state. State is far more complex. State also includes civil society, state also includes private sector, state also includes community, every individual. And whenever we see that, in societies, if you take example of, let's say, a society which has very strong community feeling, like Japan, they come out of all these disasters or, disease outbreaks or natural calamities much faster and far more, quickly and with much lesser damage. And in our own country, I mean, you will realize that any administrative unit which has much more stronger community links, whenever it gets affected by any calamity, they are able to mobilize resources much faster. Of course, government also helps, and government here is constant throughout the country. But there are some places where the community participation and the civil society and that feeling of kinship reduces the, agony and pain of individuals, and they're able to come out of all these serious setbacks much faster. I think that should be a great lesson for all of us. We need to understand that, as an individual, as a enlightened citizen, as a part of this community, we definitely need to make governments answerable and accountable for various initiatives they must take. But we on our part, we need to be actively involved in whatever possible way we can reduce the pain and agony of our own citizens. That is a very, very critical learning for all of us, and especially from, such a very serious crisis that we are facing. Now, many of us, again, in government and also as policy makers, we do a mistake of saying, this is a crisis, this will be over in 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, or whatever. But as people who are very balanced, well learned, it is difficult to say when this will be over. The best answer anyone can hear about this is, I don't know. We don't know. We can't, decide how the future will unfold, or we can't predict how the future will unfold. But we as a community and also as policymakers, what we can do is we can get ready for all the possibilities. It's like, the planning for future. Now, planning for future does not mean that you plan that, okay, this COVID will be over in 6 months and this is what is going to happen. That is not planning for future. Nor it is that planning for future that, okay, COVID will have so many cases, so many dropouts, so many girl child out of school, so much of bridge courses and so much of, extra midday meal scheme. That is not planning for future. The real future planning is about just making all the possible scenarios, okay, that, the future can unfold anywhere in this entire gamut. I am here, future could be here, 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 anywhere, in the entire gamut. And I plan in such a way so that whichever way the future unfolds, I don't have any regrets. So this is called no regret strategy. A very simple example of no regret strategy I can give you in, let's say, in healthcare sector that they did. See, in healthcare sector, it was very difficult to decide how many, COVID cases will be there, how many ventilators will be required, how many ICUs will be required, what you need to do, and so on and so forth. So one of the no regret policies was that let us build more hospitals, more hospital beds, more ICUs, more ventilators. Now, we could have built, tens of thousands of, hospital beds, tens of thousands of ICUs and ventilators. And there is a possibility that we never require them for COVID. But in a country like India, if you have a ventilator, it can be used for a neonate. It can be used for some other disease. So a country which had very low resources, it was a very great opportunity to improve your resources. If COVID comes, we were prepared. If COVID doesn't come, or the cases out of COVID are not so many, whatever resources we had put in were not going waste. They will still be utilized. So similarly, whenever we plan for future, the future planning should be in such a way that if things don't pan out as you had forecasted, that you should not have regret. And many of the strategic thinking and scenario planning, this is very critical. So in government, especially in Niti Aayog, whenever we work out about future planning, we don't tell that this is the way things will pan out. I mean, that is more like astrology. That is like a deterministic model that I am very sure this will happen. But most of the things in social sector, and especially disease epidemiology like COVID, it is stochastic. It's called probability. I don't know what will happen. So whenever we have these stochastic models playing out in front of us, we cannot tell definitely that this will happen. We can only project a possible scenarios. And within these possible scenarios, we plan out. So same way in education today, the entire planning that we are doing in education is, we are not saying that COVID will be over in August or September or October. We don't know. But we are ready with every possibility. If it ends at this date, okay, this is the way we will go. If it extends A, B, C, D, so that is what the future planning we do. So the kind of way forward that I was discussing is not very specific bullet points. It's very easy, if you go to a lecture in management school. I mean, I was lucky to go to IIM Ahmedabad also. I did executive MBA from there. So in management, most of the things that they do are deterministic. They're very clear. Transshipment model, transportation model. You can exactly tell, how you can transport something from here to Trivandrum cheapest. So you put an algorithm and you sort it out. Okay. So that is why you can come up with bullet points in management. But in governance, that what we do in governance, things are very complex. You can't fit an algorithm. And once you can't fit an algorithm, you can't have bullet points as a solution. The solution is a stochastic model. That means that, things may pan out this way, and we will do, these possible planning depending upon what the scenario is. So from our side, we have planned for, all the possible eventualities. And again, let me tell you, we don't do, unnecessary forecasting, in a deterministic way. We do it in much more organic way, because these are very complex things. We can't have one answer. So we project various scenarios and work it out. So that is what Niti Aayog does, and that is how Niti Aayog has been handling this entire crisis. And each of the sectors that is for education, I have said that in education these will be the problems. Now, similarly in education, this was for about school education side. Some of the issues in higher education which will be obviously there could be many of the graduates who are coming out of engineering colleges or management schools, or hotel management, architecture. They may not get job for some time. There were a lot of newspaper reports where they said that the placements which were given to youngsters who are graduates were withdrawn. But we came to know from MHRD that that was not a serious problem. Not so many of them were withdrawn. But it's a fact that many of the graduates who could have in normal circumstances got their jobs, but given the kind of scenario that we have in the current year, many of them may not get the jobs. So again, here government has started various initiatives in consultation with private sector, placement agencies, government's own PSUs, to provide internships, some kind of stopgap kind of initiatives within the PSUs or private sector, and so on and so forth. So many of the things are happening in the sphere of higher education also. Also because of COVID, there might be a lot of learning which used to happen one-on-one, the experiential learning, with what we used to call in classrooms, might get tweaked a little bit. So we might have some of learning which happens in physical space, and some of the learning could be through internet or online or through apps and digital media, which is called asynchronous. You can have synchronous also online, but you can have asynchronous, like MOOCs or various other initiatives. Now, in fact, that could be a great opportunity. All of your students, you might be realizing that many a times when we are learning in a classroom, we realize that a lot of interaction that goes on between the student and teacher, 30%, 40%, in some cases 70 to 80%, could have been done offline, right? You could have read the article, or you could have read the PowerPoint presentation and come to classroom for discussion rather than interaction. In many subjects, in many areas, one could do that. So in higher education, may not be so much in school education. School education will still need a much more intense classroom interaction, especially the lower classes. But as we move higher in the classes like 9, 10, then college education, we will see this trend where we will have more of blended learning. That means part of your education, part of your learning will be on your own, and part of it will be classroom interaction, which will free up a lot of resources, both physical infrastructure, teachers' time, and students also will be able to do a lot of other things. You know, what he was learning in 1 hour in a class, maybe he can finish in half an hour. So he will also be free out of it. So this will bring huge efficiency. If this entire higher education sector is handled in a far more nuanced way, far more understanding way, we will have huge resources freed up in higher education, and we will bring huge efficiency. We will also be able to increase enrollments, and maybe the cost also will come down. So, you know, the post-COVID, in many areas of education, we'll see huge innovations, efficiency, and a lot of positive things coming out. You know, any crisis, it is not only negative, negative, negative. There will be areas which will be positive, which will bring, you know, efficiency in the system. The old ways which were inefficient and not optimal for the society will give way to newer ways of doing things. So we should be ready for such kind of, you know, opportunities also. And if we are ready, both from the government side in terms of policies and, you know, resources, and people also, if the youngsters also, if they are ready with such kind of, you know, willing to go into new ways of learning, it will be win-win for the society. So I think I have talked for about half an hour, 40 minutes. I have given you just a big brush of, you know, what in the government we think about COVID, education, school education, higher education, and what as a society, especially the, you know, higher middle class, we think about problems are only a thin crust of society. There are much more serious problems in the society which we need to be concerned about. Okay, and I would urge all of you, if you have any questions, my email ID is there, or you can get in touch with me. We can interact in future also. And with these few words, I thank Panikkar Foundation and Mr. Bala Gopal and all of you in this afternoon. I can see a large number of participants, and I am here to, you know, answer to few of the questions if you have any questions, or we can interact in future also, whichever way you wish to, you know, go ahead. Thank you very much, and wish you all the best, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful session. So before Balagopalji comes in, I have a burning question. My name is Dr. Vignesh. I'm part of the National Digital Library of India team, sir. So the question is, so I have been interacting with the teachers and the librarians in the last couple of months. My experience has been all our teachers and the librarians are prepared to handle the online virtual classrooms mode. So if in my anecdotal understanding, they are not very much technical savvy, or they are not equipped to handle such kind of classes. If you like, I have a couple of kids at my home. I could see each teacher follows a different way of engaging with the children, and even in the online classes, out of if 30 students are there in a class, maybe 3 or 4 students out of only 10% of the students actually participate actively and attend these classes. So in this kind of a situation, what is your views, or is there some standard operating procedure that we can come up with, so that we can first handle the teachers and the librarians to come up to that online learning mode, and then get into the students level? I would request your response on that, sir.
Yeah, okay. So about this online learning, let me very clearly tell you that especially in the time of this crisis, when there is no alternative to learning. So one can, say that online learning is good because at least, children are learning something, right? Because there is no other way. Schools are closed. There is nothing else happening. You are, during the lockdown, you are stuck at home. So online learning is, useful because what is the alternative? Alternative is zero. So at least something you are able to learn through online. Now, in the normal times, and as we move on, we will realize that online learning is, or online learning may not be appropriate for everyone, for every class. So see that there are a large number of studies done which say that online learning is useful for higher classes. So we cannot be, using online learning for class 2 or class 3 in normal circumstances. Right now it is fine. Right now, because there is nothing is happening, so at least through online you can teach them, how to make some toys or whatever, some interaction is taking place. That is fine. But otherwise, in normal circumstances, online learning, there is a huge amount of experience that digital learning or education technology learning may be useful only in higher classes in some subjects, like maybe mathematics and science, class 9, 12, or whatever. So online learning is far more useful for them. Similarly, for college students, if you want to think about college students, online learning will be definitely useful. Online learning again will be very useful for these competitive exams because the student has already learned fair amount of basic concepts in his or her classroom. Then online learning through MOOCs or Coursera or Byju's or Khan Academy or I don't know whatever, there are hundreds of them, thousands of them. That will be useful. But to teach basic concepts for much more lower classes, it will be difficult. And it may not be of great use. This is one. This is about the general online learning. Now, as far as you're concerned about teachers, there are studies that for a teacher to be well versed with use of technology, which is online learning and everything, it takes 2 to 3 years. And this study is from developed countries like Japan, Singapore, Korea. You imagine in India, our teachers are, relatively more backward as far as technology use is concerned. So the teachers' training will be very, very critical. So that's why we need to understand this entire technology and use of technology for education in a much more deeper way. There is a third dimension. That is, dimension 1 was whether this is a good way of learning. Dimension 2 is the interface between the teacher and the student. The third dimension is whenever we use this online technology, we are leaving out our poor people. So the dualism which is already there in education, that rich and elite children, they get good education in private schools. This education technology or online learning will magnify that difference. A child in Kalahandi or Chengalpat or Medak district in Telangana will not be able to learn online learning, but a person who is in Pune or Bangalore or Chennai or Mumbai can get benefit, and if he or she is from a richer family, if he or she has a laptop. Now in this country, only 10% of families have laptops, 90% don't have. So this, when we are pushing for online learning or when we are pushing for digital technology, in the times like now, it is great. One. Second, as a supplement, as a complement to the general education, it is good. But we should not reach a conclusion that online learning or education technology will replace the formal education. So whenever we are pushing for all this, online learning, technological learning, we need to be aware of all these, facets of what we are doing. And once we are conscious of all these issues, then it is perfectly fine. Then we should push for it. Then we should immediately push. But we should be conscious that online learning is not always good, especially for small children in different subjects. The teachers, they always face problems. See, online learning somehow magnifies this haves and have-nots. We should be conscious of this. And once we are conscious, then only we should go ahead and push for it. And that is what government is doing. And if you see Prime Minister's e-Vidya program, there we have gone for cost-effective, low-tech, high-reach kind of solutions. So they are very cheap. Their technology may not be great, but its reach is very, very high. So we have pushed for that kind of technology. And high tech, perfectly fine, you go ahead. We don't have problem. But as a government, we have been pushing for this. So I think this is what we need to be, conscious when we are talking about education technology or online learning or MOOCs or, all these technological ways of learning.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for answer. So over to Balagopalji. Do you want to?
Prem Singh ji, it was a wonderful speech with a lot of information. Everybody is inspired by your speech. And you rightly said the poor people, the poorest of the poor will not get the benefits of this online education. But I am told that by the McKinsey, the world leader, they are telling that by 2022, when the India reaches its 75th independence, 90% of the villages will have internet connectivity. Once this internet connectivity is realized, these poorest of the poor people can also enjoy digital reading, and they can, without going to schools or colleges, they can get degrees, diplomas, and they can qualify for what we called the life skill education. That's the need of the day, life skill education. Thank you for your amazing speech, and we will all take your messages, take your lessons into practical solutions. Thank you, sir, again. Thank you again, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. And all the participants, thank you so much. And if you have any questions, if you want any discussions, my email ID is there with Mr. Balagopal. I'll request him to share with you so that
Yes, sir.
we can
Definitely,
interact in future. Thank you so much.
Definitely, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
for
very
your
much.
time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Balagopal sir, and thanks to Prem Singh sir for this wonderful session. So I have shared the feedback from URL in the chat box. Kindly click on this URL and then submit your feedback within next 1 hour. And in case if you have not registered for this webinar, I request you to first register yourself and then submit the feedback. So for registration for this webinar, I'm just putting the URL in the chat box again. So in case if it says like you have not registered for this webinar, so just click on this registration form and then submit the feedback. The feedback form URL, I'm putting it in the chat window. And tomorrow we have a very interesting webinar on COVID-19 and digital libraries. So Professor Partha Pratim Das, who is the professor of computer science and engineering, and also the joint principal investigator of National Digital Library of India. So he is going to be the resource person for tomorrow's webinar. So, and he's going to talk on COVID-19 and digital libraries. And I'm sure you will enjoy his session. And he's one of those amazing presenters. You can interact with him tomorrow at 6 p.m. So kindly register yourself for this webinar. So you can register for tomorrow's webinar from this URL. I'm just putting it in the chat window.
Resignation phone.
So Balagopal sir, I'm going to end this webinar, sir. So you can.
Okay, very good. It was a well, and you steered it very well, and I'm grateful to you for making this webinar a useful one.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.